Talk to the people. Look at the camera. Say hello, camera. Hello everyone and welcome back to my semi-brand new YouTube channel. Layla is here. My sister is eating snacks upstairs and Layla thinks that means it's time for her treats, but it's not. We already had our treats today, right Layla? So the biggest story it seems like in the news right now are all these uncovered classified documents that have been found in several politicians' homes. Most notably, I'm talking about former Vice President Mike Pence, former President Donald Trump, and the current President of the United States, President Joe Biden. Although the documents that were found in his private residence and office were documents from when he was Vice President under Obama. And there's a lot of discussion about what's different between what happened with Trump's documents and what's happening with Biden's documents. But instead of talking about all that, today I really want to focus on why all this is even happening in the first place. And it's important to note that what happened several years ago with Hillary Clinton and her emails, it's all kind of under the same umbrella here. And a couple of disclaimers before we start. I'm still very new at this, so any feedback you have, I greatly appreciate. The other day, someone commented that I was sitting too close to the camera, and I know I'm sitting very close to the camera, but I don't have that much space to work with. And today I'm trying something new. I'm trying to film a video before I go to work instead of after I get home from work. So the lighting, you can see, the sunlight is out and it's peeking through my window. I hope that's not a deal breaker for you. And lastly, I am by no means an expert on all of this. I just read up on the biggest news stories of today. And I have linked all the sources that I used for this video in the description below if you want to do some research for yourself. And with that, let's get started. Hopefully today's video is going to be a little bit shorter than my previous videos. We're only going to break this video down into 4 parts. What is classified information? How much information is classified in the United States? When this all really started? And why this even matters? This is clearly an issue that doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. The fact that classified documents were found in the private residences of former government officials, and it doesn't even seem that these government officials knew that the documents were present at the time, that's not a good thing. And yes, I do have to acknowledge that the situation with former President Donald Trump is very different than the situation with former Vice President Mike Pence and current President Joe Biden. Both Biden and Pence immediately turned over the documents that were found, whereas Trump refused to fork over the documents, and that is why the FBI raided his Mar-a-Lago home. But that's all we're going to talk about, the specifics of those individual cases today. Because the truth of the matter is we may never know the information that was found at those homes, and I'm not even sure if it truly matters for what we're talking about today. Before we even get started with what it means for a document to be classified, you need to know that on average, records are marked as classified 3 times every second. When we're talking about classified documents, this is an umbrella term, and we're going to break down the word classified and the word documents because it's a lot more complicated than it seems. First things first, when I'm referring to documents, I'm not necessarily referring to a piece of 8x11 paper with words on it. Classified information, classified documents in this case, could be anything from emails to text messages to transcripts to newspaper articles. We are talking about all different kinds of information. We're gonna give Layla a moment. You like to lick yourself, Miss Layla? You look really cute today. The lighting is good for you, you know. Also, Layla just recently turned 11, so please wish her happy birthday in the comments below. So when I say documents, we could really be talking about anything. Classified documents and classified information are going to be synonymous for the purposes of this video. The 3 categories that information can be classified under are confidential, secret, and top secret. These classifications are defined by how much that information is a potential threat to national security. Confidential information is defined as mere damage, secret information is defined as serious damage, and then top secret information is defined as having the potential for an exceptionally grave danger to national security. So top secret is the highest classification, but there are some documents and information that are filed under SCI, which stands for Sensitive Compartmented Information. All classification determinations are subjective, so that means there is no clear definition. And sure, things like military technology and who might be a spy for the US government, information like that, it's pretty easy to say that it should be highly classified. But as you'll see throughout this video, there is an extreme tendency within the government to overclassify information. And some things probably should never have been classified, and it's hard to understand why they were. So how does all this information become classified in the first place? Well, as things are overclassified, the government does not track all of the information that has been classified, which is kind of crazy to think, because if information is so highly sensitive to national security that it should be marked as top secret or it should be marked as classified, shouldn't you want to know where that information is and who knows about that information? But there are so many classified documents within the government that it's nearly impossible to keep track of them all. But even though there's no clear record of what documents have been classified or declassified or where those documents are even being stored, there are some rules on how documents should be handled. For example, how they should be transported, stored, and eventually declassified or even destroyed. Another crazy statistic about classified documents is an estimated 1.2 million people in the United States have top secret security clearance. And while, yes, these people have passed extensive background checks to be granted this clearance, if information is really that top secret, should 1.2 million people really know about it? And yes, different top secret information may not be able to be shared between different governmental agencies, and only a few thousand officials have the ability to mark information as classified. But this information could range from anything from a singular email to an entire governmental program. And if we're talking about an entire government program that has been deemed classified, that means every single meeting, phone call, text that is sent in regards to that government program is also marked as classified. So you can see how this information really racks up over time. And then since there's so much information, some of this information that has been marked classified and even top secret in some cases is already readily available to the public. So in the example I brought up earlier of Hillary Clinton's emails, one of the emails that was sent that was marked as classified was a newspaper article. And newspaper articles are open to the public. It's a journalist's responsibility to share this information with the public. So how could a newspaper article therefore become classified? That's because the information that the newspaper article was discussing was about a government program that was classified. So it's all very complicated, but as you can see, the rules and regulations that we have in place about what can be classified, they don't really make sense. The same officials that have the power to mark information as classified, they also have the power to declassify that information. And really the only person that has access to all top secret classified information is the President of the United States. They are the only one who can do this like one classification fits all thing and view information and documents from all different government agencies. The President of the United States is the highest level official when it comes to classification authority. They have the ability to personally deem information as sensitive or to declassify if they want. But it's rare that this actually happens because the president is too busy presidenting, So they usually delegate that responsibility to other members of their administration. Speaking of the president, let's talk about when all this classification stuff started, and I'll give you a hint, it wasn't from the Founding Fathers. The modern classification system that we use today, that 3-level labeling system, was created by an executive order from President Harry Truman in 1951. So it really hasn't been that long. Truman issued this executive order shortly after World War II. During World War II, there were a lot of issues with national security and keeping information on a need-to-know basis. There were some classification efforts in place, but they weren't consistent. In fact, government officials learned to form relationships with journalists and simply asked them not to publish information that had the potential to threaten national security. And for the most part, journalists respected that. And for Truman's credit, he did turn the classification system from something that was extremely inconsistent into something that is extremely consistent. But the system is so consistent that so much information is becoming classified. I also want to note that Truman's system was created way before the invention of the internet, and much of the technology we use to transmit information today. And information is so much more readily available today than it was in the 50s. Just think about this YouTube video right now that you are watching. I read and researched probably 20 different articles from 20 different publications about classified information ahead of filming and recording this video. You are now watching this video wherever you are in the world, based off the information that I am sharing to you. Now, will this video become classified? Will I be contacted by the United States government? I really hope not. Now I'm scared. But no matter what, this is now information that is publicly available to anyone who wants it. So to some extent, I can understand why the government feels a need to overclassify information. They don't want information in the wrong hands, but at the same time, they are classifying stuff that isn't even secret information. It's already available to the public. Another major critique of the system that Truman put in place is the only question it required of people who were classifying documents was, how big of a threat is this document to national security? And if it was a threat, it became classified. Even if it was the smallest threat, that document became classified. But no one thought to ask, does the public deserve to know this information? If the government, hypothetically, was doing something that was wrong, I'm going to pause so you can take a moment to think about something that the government could potentially be doing that could be considered wrong, that they wouldn't want the public to know about. Okay, you got something? Well, in that case, you, as a member of the public, do you believe that you have a right to know that information? To know that certain people are being threatened? Do you believe that you have the right to know that your personal safety might be at risk? When it comes to this system, no one is asking those questions. The only thing that is being looked out for in this case is the government itself, not the people who the government works for. And since there are so many people that have the power to classify and declassify information, it only makes sense that information would be overclassified because you don't want the responsibility of not classifying something that should have been classified. Jeez, how many times have I said classify in this video? And although the guidance set forth by Truman and this executive order is still what is mostly followed today, pretty much every presidential administration since Truman has changed the classification guidelines a bit themselves, but both Trump and Biden have followed the same guidelines that Obama set forth in his executive order in 2009. Okay, we're finally getting to the end of this video. Lastly, and pretty much most importantly, let's talk about why this matters. In a perfect world, let's just take a second to imagine what that might look like. I like to think Layla's imagining her own perfect world right now. Some people feel that classified information should have some sort of time limit. Classified information should be archived and therefore preserved. Layla, no. This is your perfect world. You must stay here. A perfect world with you and me. Classified documents would first be archived and then preserved for a certain amount of time, and after that time period elapsed, they would then be declassified and released to the public. Because after a certain period of time, that information should no longer be considered sensitive and a threat to national security. Like the saying, don't serve your beef hot, but you also don't want to serve your beef too cold. Like if you've got a problem with someone, you got to serve that beef at room temperature if you want it to be resolved. If the beef is too hot, you're gonna get burned. And if the beef is too cold, it's gonna be too tough to even chew. But if you serve your beef at a room temperature, it'll go down easy. But in this case, the government wants to serve their beef cold. They want to declassify information and for people to not even notice that it was declassified. Or if people notice, they don't really care. But a major issue here is that A lot of researchers have found that so much classified information after a certain period of time just gets destroyed, and that there are huge gaps in US government history when you go back and try and find information. And this is not good. I mean, the whole classification thing is like super complicated, and it can be viewed as censorship in some instances. And if the US government is doing things that people shouldn't know about while they're happening, I mean, I guess that's one thing, but people should have the ability to know about it at some point. You can't just erase history. I mean, you can erase history, but you shouldn't erase history. And the final issue with this is the same thing they say in The Incredibles. If everyone is super, then no one is super. And in this case, if all information is marked as secret, then nothing is secret. If you do not identify the information that is the most important to keep on a need-to-know basis as separate from all of the rest of the information that is classified, how are you supposed to keep track and know the information that is actually a threat to national security? I mean, there's a lot of big questions to ask here, and part of the reason why there hasn't been major reform to the classification system sooner is it's pretty much the responsibility of the President of the United States to set that standard. But when you have a changeover of administration potentially every 4 years, and sometimes that transition isn't as smooth as people might have anticipated, it can be really hard to keep the classification standards up. And the fact that we now know there were just documents sitting in the homes of former government officials, I think that's a pretty blatant metaphor for how classified documents are treated overall in the United States. And if classification is such a big deal and there's information that needs to be kept secret, it should be treated a lot more carefully. So I want to know, did you know this information about the classification system before this video? Do you think that President Trump or President Biden should be held liable for having classified information in their personal possession? And lastly, even if you barely watch this video or if you watch this video on mute, please just comment and like it and subscribe and share with your friends. Thank you. I'm working really hard on this channel, and I know it doesn't look like it, but this is much more difficult than it seems. And I really just like doing this, and if you like me doing this, I want to be able to keep doing it. And before Layla and I are set free to go conquer the world, we just want to say thank you for watching, and we'll see you when we see you. Bye!